the Grant Professional Association's webinar. This webinar is titled The Power of Social Networks, Pre through Post Grant Award. My name is Kelly Romero, and I am the Membership Director for GPA and your webinar moderator for today. You are all placed in listen-only mode, which means that your line is muted. If you would like to ask a question, please feel free to use the chat box on your screen to submit your questions, or you can raise your hand and we will get your line unmuted. We will get to as many questions as time permits throughout the webinar. At the end of the webinar, you will be directed to a brief survey, and we ask that you please fill this out to assist us with all of our future webinars, including topics and how the presenters did as well. And then you will also receive the recorded version of this webinar later this afternoon. Today's presenters are Diane H. Leonard, GPC, and Joe Miller, GPC, CSMS. Diane, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. And I believe I can see a wonderful phone number that I recognize as Joe in the audio, but she still shows as muted. So I'm hoping if she hits *7 that you'll hear her wonderful voice as well and not just mine, but we'll see if that works. Well, welcome everyone to the Power of Social Networks. This is a topic that Joe and I both are very passionate about. We love to talk about how social networks are influencing partnerships, outcomes, funding, just so many grant-related things. My co-presenter today, we're going to be a little backwards. We're going to introduce each other. So Joe Miller is a grant professional certified, so she's a GPC. She's also has the distinction of being a certified social media strategist. That's what the CSMS after her name is. And so as part of both of her certifications, she's a GPA approved trainer and also a National Institute for Social Media certified trainer. She's on the board for GPA, she's on the social media committee, she's the owner of Smarty Grants and Grant Chat, and also of J. Miller and Associates. Now let's see if this works. Hey Joe, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Hello. Thank you guys for your patience. So it is my pleasure to introduce Diane. Diane is also a grant professional certified. She's a GPA approved trainer. She's a GPA Social Media Task Force Chair. Thank you very much, Diane, for doing that. And she is the owner of D.H. Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services. So one thing that we won't cover today is how to set up accounts. Now, both Diane and I are happy to help anyone, and a lot of folks on our social media committee are happy to help any grant professional out there who would like to set up some accounts or who has questions about their account. Feel free after this to send us some questions. We'll be happy to help you, but we won't be covering that today.
But what will we be covering? We want to look at changes and trends. Right? Things are changing rapidly, so we're going to look at how some of that has grown. We want to look at how we as grant professionals and those professionals we work with in our grant work, how everyone can use social media and social networks for their professional development, as well as when we're thinking about grant-funded programs, how can that help in the goals? How can that help us with our data for evaluation? So a pretty ambitious list of what we'd like to cover in our 60 minutes today.
Fantastic. There are some other resources for you about social media and grants. We have smartygrants.com. We provide webinars, training, resources on social media and grants. And we have weekly video conference calls, All Things Grants on Blab. We also have Grant Chat, grantchat.org. We'll talk a little bit more about that throughout this presentation. But it is a weekly Twitter chat, and we have searchable chats, archives about social media and grants. Of course, the Grant Professionals Association has lots of articles and webinars on social media and grants, and the National Institute for Social Media has some excellent resources. We have some links here in this presentation for you for that. And then Social Media for Nonprofits. They're an excellent organization. They do have a Twitter chat. They have a LinkedIn page and some other resources for you to learn social media and how that might impact your grants program and your nonprofits. So what are the trends and changes that we're seeing with the intersection of social media and grants? Well, we're seeing that social media is being accepted and even promoted by funders large and small, from federal grant makers to private foundations, as part of the grant cycle and within their grant programs.
And we have a few examples for you today as we talk through these different sections. And so our first example, as we think about how is social media mainstream now with grant makers, well, what we actually have is a small regional foundation sort of in my backyard, the Richard S. Shinneman Foundation. Small but powerful staff. They work in central New York outside of Syracuse, New York. And with that small staff, they don't necessarily have the capacity to communicate by more traditional means with their potential and current grantees or their stakeholders in the community. But what they do enjoy doing is sharing information on Facebook and occasionally engaging on Twitter as well. And so it's a way that as a small staff, and this is what we're seeing as a trend, some of the small staffs are able to use social media to interact in a bigger way.
And one of the examples here in my backyard in Minnesota is the Deluxe Corporation. Now, it's interesting as a juxtaposition to the smaller foundation. This is a large, huge corporation, and what they did, and they have plenty of staff, and they have professional marketers, etc. But what they did was really, really interesting. They have a foundation, and they created a short and tweet grants program. So last year, the Deluxe Corporation did this process, and basically people were encouraged to tweet their nominations. So their grant application basically was 140 characters or less, and eligible nominees were organizations whose primary mission were based in economic empowerment, creating tomorrow's workforce, promoting financial literacy, and crisis assistance or the arts. 10 nonprofits received $10,000 each because of tweets. So we're really seeing social media being used in a variety of ways in a lot of organizations. Another example is social media being used to get the word out about grant opportunities, from grant training and tools to foundation and government grants. Grant makers are using social media to share their work, fund their programs, and to share their impact. So grant makers are using social media.
Oh, I had myself muted. Sorry. All sorts of tech problems today. But I was just saying, it's mainstream, but there's all these questions. How do we engage? How do they engage? What are the rules of the road? What are we seeing?
Well, we know that getting face-to-face with a funder can really impact our relationships with funders. That one-on-one, that in-person engagement, whether it's a site visit or meeting a funder and looking at the funding opportunity, it's kind of the golden ticket to building relationships. But let's look at how social media can also help us with that engagement, that personal touch. So we're seeing funders share what they fund, what their grantees are doing. Remember those days when we got books and CDs with funder information, which sometimes had who they funded and what was happening with the grant program, but not a lot of details. Now we're seeing that grant makers promote their own programs. And here you can see how the Minnesota Agricultural Department is promoting their Ag Growth Research and Innovation Grants program. And they have created a video that they published on YouTube. And they tweeted about it. So they're using all sorts of ways to get that information out, to engage their community, and to share their impact. It's a great example of what a funder can do using various and complementary platforms.
And then if we look on the private foundation side, we're seeing foundations that are working within the U.S., that are working internationally, that are creatively sharing and talking about their grantees, interacting with them, promoting their work, promoting their funded work, and sometimes their non-directly funded work. We're seeing things like the Knight Foundation, where they're announcing their awards and they're having live streams from their funding award announcements, right? How different is that from the days when we only could wait by the mailbox to open an award letter? So things are really changing for how creatively funders are engaging their stakeholders in the work that they do.
And we're also seeing funders encouraging and even requiring the use of social media by their grantees. Using social media for social advocacy, constituent engagement, education is recognized by many funders as essential to part of effective programming. So when you see that in the NOFA, in the RFP, in the grant announcement, when they ask you for your social media handles, they're looking to see how engaged you are and how you are doing with your outreach. They're going and looking at your handles, and they're giving extra points in grant awards for those that are using social media. So bear that in mind when you're applying for your grants.
And let's look at a few of those specific examples, right? We used to look for that language about the ability to phone or an email, but really, we're looking for social media too. It definitely is some great extra language to keep an eye out for that'll clue you in for what their capacity preference or their communication preference and capacity is. So in this case, we've got the Meyer Foundation as one example. They're telling you right in their materials, connect with us. They'd like to acknowledge, they like to recognize, they're telling you what networks they prefer. It doesn't mean that you should go join those networks just so that you can connect with them, but rather if you're already there and you're applying or you're awarded, you certainly want to connect and interact as, we'll say, respectfully and naturally as you can. Another example here, it says that they're talking about, well, you could communicate, but there's some limits here for how it is that we're going to look to use Facebook within our work, right? So we're also seeing the same issues that are coming up with your organization as a grant-seeking group, trying to figure out how do we interact, what's happening, where, how do we use it. We're seeing it on the funder side too. So everybody's facing these issues, thinking about how is it that we can interact together. And then, Joe, did you want to talk about this communications guidance?
Sure.
Okay?
We have, yeah, you bet. So we are seeing across federal agencies that not only are they encouraging the use of social media, but they're providing guidance. They're providing communication guidance. So you want to go out, whoever you're looking at getting funding from, if they're mentioning social media, if they have social media accounts, you want to look for those, but you also want to look on their web pages for their communication guidance. They're going to give you guidance on what they expect, how they expect communication to happen within their organization and with their constituents, but what they're going to expect from their grantees as well. So let's look at the EPA's social media presence. The EPA has an extensive social media presence, and I love their statement on social media and why they use it. And I think we can all, take this and use this as a great way to explain why we're using social media in our organizations. So they use it for transparency and for public process. They use the technologies and the tools to share information so everyone can gain a better understanding of environmental conditions and solutions. Now, I will say that EPA certainly encourages the use of social media. Next slide, please. And here's a list of tools and platforms that they use. This list is on their site, so you can go there and they add new ones as they come out. But each of these links right here will take you to another list of handles. They have numerous Twitter handles, so each region and some of the particular issues have their own handles. Now, one of the things I love about EPA, and I would definitely recommend, is I love their Instagram presence. They are doing it right. So if you want to see an Instagram done right by a funder or government agency, I definitely recommend going to the EPA account.
So let's switch gears for a second and think about how is it that we as grant professionals can foster our own professional development utilizing social media. Whether you're based in a rural community like I am, like Joe is, right, where we have to drive a little bit to maybe get to some of the big city professional development opportunities, or whether you're based in one of those urban settings, but time is tight. There's a lot of different ways that we can gain professional development opportunities through social media. Right? We've got some different examples for you here looking at the different platforms because, let's be honest, we're all more comfortable probably in one setting versus another. So I wanted to share with you, if we think about more the idea of forums where we get to have some conversation, we can engage, have some bigger dialogue. We're looking at the GPA LinkedIn group. This is a wonderful opportunity to look either at a chapter level or really the big national association, to be a part of those groups, to ask questions, to answer questions, to look back at past resources, right? Our question might not be the first time that it's been asked, so maybe we can go see what's been discussed recently about it. So some wonderful opportunities there, and actually it's the social media task force and the staff, we're doing our best to help be a voice and answer consistently, but quite honestly, we rely on GPA members and group members to help add and keep that dialogue as rich as possible. So I want to encourage you to feel comfortable, be a voice, share your experience there.
Excellent, excellent. So nowadays, you can find a Facebook group for almost anything that interests you. And, Facebook is growing again. In fact, it's changed since Diane and I did this presentation last fall. It's changed dramatically with the addition of Facebook Live. So community forums are becoming a rich environment with lots of content and great video, giving more access to and engagement with the experts and the community. Grant Chat has a Facebook community, and that's growing. We also have a few others. Again, you can find a Facebook group for almost any topic or issue. Many funders have the Facebook communities, Facebook groups. So be sure to go and look. Don't assume that Facebook is just for our personal use anymore. It's a great platform for professional development and for engaging with others. Another tool, one of our favorites, is Twitter chats. And we have Grant Chat, as I mentioned earlier. Grant Chat happens every week, almost every week, on Tuesday at 12 Eastern. And I host it weekly. We have guests for most of the weeks now. We have some fabulous guests coming up. Not that all of our guests aren't fabulous, but I'm really, really excited about some of the ones that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. You can go to grantchat.org to look at our schedule, to get preview questions, and to see some of our archives. Another chat that we like is Fund Chat. That community, many people in our Grant Chat community interact with the Fund Chat. I know Diane's on that one. That one happens on Wednesdays, but not every Wednesday. So you'll want to follow Fund Chat on Twitter or go to their website to get their schedule and see what's coming up. Now, we aren't the only ones that use Twitter chats. Funders are using Twitter chats, believe it or not. And you can see here that they had the Housing and Opportunities chat, which gave an opportunity for the grant makers, their constituents, and the grantees to have a dialogue about a white paper that had recently been out, this particular chat. They have numerous chats. HUD does a lot of Twitter chats for their different programs. They aren't consistent chats where they're weekly chats, but they'll come up with different topics. So be sure to follow your funders on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, to find out what's happening, when they have announcements, and how they are engaging their constituents.
And if we switch to yet another network, right, one more place where we can get professional development, what if we think about who likes to listen to podcasts? What are industry-specific things or maybe funding interest areas where we can listen to podcasts and improve our learning opportunities, right? Lots of opportunities there in that way. If we look at YouTube, well, I know that personally when I need a good laugh, there are some great grant humor videos on YouTube. So that to me is an important part of professional development. But there's also funders there. And so I can look and get some technical assistance related to what is a funder concerned about? What are they thinking about related to a particular funding opportunity that's coming up? And so my example here is the New York State Council on the Arts. I talked with their executive director last year after they'd released these YouTube videos, and I said, wow, this is so great. Like, there's not that many funders doing this. You really should thank our new intern, right? Because that was the person that had driven all of this work. But you know what? The intern moved on, went back to school. They continued it afterwards because they realized that the value in reaching all of their constituents around the entire state in all corners of all counties was so significant, right? Not everybody can get to those in-person sessions. And this was so much better than just the webinar that they offered. They were able to offer different mediums for the learning for their potential grantees. So it's one of my favorite examples, but the story for why it started cracked me up when I heard it at a meeting with her.
It's a great story, and we hear that over and over again. The intern. The intern helped get it going. And that happened with email. That happened with websites, and it's happening with social media. Video streaming, there are a lot of different platforms for video streaming, live video streaming, podcasts, etc. And that really is the direction things are going. As I mentioned, Facebook Live is something that came out this year. And then we also have Blab. We've been using Blab at Smarty Grants. And we also have Google Hangouts. Now, those two are both growing. Google Hangouts in the last couple of months has had an infusion, I would say, from Google in making it stronger. And Blab is still in beta. So we'll see how both of those platforms fight it out. But they're great ways to connect with people all over the country or all over the world, all over the globe, in a way that opens a dialogue, gets a sense of face-to-face. You get to know the person more than maybe just emails or even conference calls. So we did use Blab last year with the Deluxe Corporation. I mentioned earlier their Sweet and Tweet Grants program. We brought them on and interviewed their marketing director about why did they choose to use Twitter for their grant applications and to use it. It was a fun thing to do. Their marketing people were not aware of this platform, and they weren't using a lot of live video. They brought her on. They all loved it. It was a great platform and a great way to get their word out, particularly since they were already using social media to promote the program. So again, there's a lot of different ways to use live video. And we definitely recommend using it where you can, when you can, for education, outreach, and for connecting with others in your professional network.
Great. And before we move on to, I was going to say, we've got a question I know from Sarah.
Oh, sure.
And so before we move on to grant research and development, I thought, Sarah, if you want to dial *7 and unmute yourself, you can ask your question and we can answer right now.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I obviously have an account on Twitter, but I don't know how to sign up for chats and hoped you might talk about that.
Sure. Well, if you want to be part of Grant Chat, all you need to do is get on Twitter, put the #, the hashtag, and Grant Chat. That'll bring up everyone that's talking about that topic. We recommend using a tool like tchat.io, which if you log in with your Twitter account, it will automatically add the hashtag to the account. We do have some information on how to do a Twitter chat, how to participate in the chat. But basically, it's you log into Twitter, you search that hashtag, whatever hashtag the chat is using, and you begin chatting. Just making sure that that hashtag is on all of your communication so that everybody sees it. But we'll send out some information. We'll make it available how to do a Twitter chat. How do you participate in one after the chat? That helps.
Sarah, if you need to mute your line back, you can dial *6.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so let's talk about grant research and development. And by the way, Sarah, thank you for your question. Anybody else that has a question, feel free to ask anytime. So grant research and development. How do we use the power of social networks and social media for grant research and development? Well, we listen. We research partners and competitors by listening. We look at where they are on social media. We look at what's important to them. We can find out a lot about our potential partners. We can find out a lot about our competitors. Who else is going to be applying for that grant? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How can we improve? We can also find out a lot about, again, the grant maker. What's important to them? What are we seeing as a priority for them? Do they have any reports that have recently come out that they're pushing out on social media? Again, we can use social media, use these networks to find out more and to prepare for our grants. So let's look at some examples.
Absolutely. Let's do that. We've got a good mix here of things to look at as some examples on how we could do that. So if we think about the partners, the competitors piece, right, it's sort of like a little bit of a rabbit hole sometimes, right? We get into research, we're used to thinking about our funder databases, and then we're on the website, and then we're like, ooh, social media button, and out we go. And all of a sudden now we're down this awesome path, and we're like, okay, like Joe said, what are they sharing? How are they talking about their grantees? Are they promoting their grantees' work? We get a sense of their voice for what they're caring about. Then, I'll tell you, when I really am fueled and I've got my coffee and some time to play, well, then I'm out there and I'm looking at their funders. I'm clicking through the funder site, and I'm like, okay, who did they fund? Let's look at those grantees. And now I'm looking at their sites. How are they interacting with that grant maker? I'm trying to get ideas. What do we see? What's that conversation look like? Because it's modeling for us what some potential conversations could look like, what might be appropriate or a preference for the funder. So sometimes when it's that we don't have necessarily access to the funder, right? We know not all funders are able to pick up the phone or to have an email dialogue. Sometimes we've got to read between the lines. And looking at these networks gives us the chance to see their more current voice than what we might be seeing on their website. Now another example is then again sticking with that grantee idea, how are they recognizing the funders? Is the funder then interacting with that post in any way? We know that in foundation grants we're often talking about how will we recognize our funders? Well, there are some good examples. We can go, that was really well done. I should remember that as some inspiration for when I write my next, how am I going to recognize my funder section, right? Use those as inspiration. Talk to your communications staff or the folks that are in charge of social media. How is it that you could do a similar version or an inspired version of what your partners or your competitors are doing to interact with funders?
So here we see the Bush Foundation. Bush Foundation's here in Minnesota. They're an excellent and innovative foundation. We see here that they are recognizing one of their grantees. They've put a link to that grantee. They've put some information about what the grantee is doing. Really phenomenal work. And so we know, A, that they've invested in this grantee and that they're promoting the grantee's work. Well done. So great way to use social media, great way to see what's important to the funder and how we might be able to interact with them and what kind of information, if we're a grantee, they might want from us. They have a picture here, they have information, they have a link to the grantee's website. So the grantee's done their work as well. The grantee has put information out there for the funder to promote. So it goes hand in hand. Make sure that you are communicating if you want your funder to promote you. If you see that they promote others, have that information available on your website. Provide that information to them outside of and within your grant reports. Another thing we can do is look at community needs. We can find a lot of community need data through different social media platforms. And we often can get some of that data firsthand. So if you look at our next slide, which is the kids count slide, you can see here that they have put out some research. They have a new, or at the time they had some new data. They put it out. We were able to get that data earlier than we would have otherwise. That as soon as it was out, they started tweeting about it, they posted it in social media, and we were alerted to it right away through our feeds on the various platforms. So you can get a lot of information and get a lot of alerts and get that information as soon as it's available if you're listening to what the funders are doing, listening to who might be doing research on a particular topic that you need the data on. So again, we love the power of social networks and how readily we can get information.
And so then we've got the other side of research, right? There's the data that we're using in our proposals, and then there's the data and the research that we're learning about the grant makers themselves. So not just our databases, but how are we going to fill in some of those gaps? How are we going to fill out the rest of our research jigsaw puzzle to make sure that we understand as much as possible before we reach out to establish a relationship, before hopefully we actually put pen to paper, right? We want to know as much as we can. Are we really competitive? Are all our questions answered? And as we mentioned earlier, the social media networks are giving us the chance to understand more of the day-to-day voice what is important to this particular grant maker each and every day. What research reports are they sharing? What are they retweeting? What are they liking on Facebook? It gives us that personal voice. Now, the person managing the grant maker's social media networks probably doesn't have the power over their final decisions, right? So it's not that having an interaction on social media is going to be a perfect connection then to help you with that. But in the long run, you know more than you would have otherwise, right? It's just one more tool in your toolbox of research. But let's assume we've successfully used our social media in order to establish relationships, in order to do some research. We do all our amazing writing work that we know we all do. It's funded. Awesome, right? Well, now, how can we use social media, social networks, for our implementation and for our evaluation? Joe's got some awesome examples for you.
Yes, so let's look at some examples of sharing the grant award news. Now, we talked a little bit about this earlier in that section, and Diane gave some great examples. Let's look at a few more here. All right, so you can see, don't we all look just like this when we get that award? Yay! You know, Google awards $100,000 to 6 nonprofits, and they are announced via Twitter. We also see here that even the federal agencies are using their social media accounts to make announcements to show how they're investing in community with their grants. So these are great examples, smiling faces, big checks, excitement, how we all feel when we get that grant award.
Now my next example is one, if you look really closely, you can actually see my first grader's head in this one picture on the top left. But this is actually a group that we work with. She happened to be cute enough to pose in the picture. But what happened was that there was a funder that made a significant match commitment. And it's with kids, it's with education, it's on the water. There's so many great photo opportunities, right? Well, what they did, and this was their idea. I was so proud. I said, guess what? You get to be a case study example, right? So as they announced, they went through this whole thing, get match dollars, get the community rallied, get the participants and their parents rallied, and they blew by their match deadline or their requirement. They did fantastic. So their communication staff put together a really well-connected social media push to let all their stakeholders know that they had done it, that they had met their match and exceeded it, and to say thank you. So on the left was the email that they had sent, as well as what it looked like on their website. On the right, we have their Facebook post, where they told everyone that they had done it, right? So same images, same basic text, but different networks. Then they went ahead and they made it so that it worked on Instagram. And lastly, it went out on Twitter. So they got engagement from all sorts of stakeholders everywhere. It took just a little bit of customization. They're a teeny but powerful staff, right? It was within their means. It was a great way to help engage both the funder and the stakeholder. And there's so many more examples that we could share, things that are being done well. But these are great ways to go, how could we do something like that? How could we make it our own? Well, that's announcing the award. That's announcing that we've met our match. But what if we're thinking about project data, evaluation, our success? How are we sharing our success beyond the dollars received? We could think about imagery related to evaluation. This is actually a screenshot of an evaluation and data section on Pinterest. Maybe we're trying to think about how could we visually share our success in a way that makes sense on social media. So seek inspiration from others. How could we do that in a way that speaks for itself in just an image? This example here came, again, it's a Pinterest example, but you go, oh, I could take that. We already know what's happening in the classroom. We know what's happening with our students. We know what's happening in whatever our program is, right? What visually is going to resonate with your stakeholders and with your funders. Be creative in thinking about how to showcase what to you are your really unique, amazing, positive results. Now, you may wonder, how do we measure the use of social media? How do we know
that social media should be part of our grants and that it's a tool that we can use to, again, provide the funder with more information. Well, we love what the Knight Foundation did with this Impact, a practical guide to evaluating community information projects. They looked at how do you get information out there, how do you use social media, and how do you measure that as part of your grant program, particularly when there's a lot of great health and behavior change programs out there, and those are perfect for the use of social media. So they have this excellent graphic here. I won't read it all out to you. You have it in your handouts, but it really looks at how many visitors do you get on your website, how many clicks and retweets do you get, how is that happening with your community, how are your constituents engaging, interacting, and sharing with their peers. What's the voice that you have? What action are you asking people to take? Do you have a call to action? And when you have your call to action, are they responding? The great thing, one of the many great things about social media is that there's so much data behind the scenes you can track. You can use social media to track some of the data and evaluate it and look at how are you engaging people, what changes are you making, how are people sharing the information, and be able to report that back to your funder and to your community and other constituents. So let's look at some of the changes and challenges. Change happens, and there are a lot of changes and challenges out there with social media. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now and give you some good examples.
Well, some good examples, right? And some things to avoid, some ways to try and avoid them.
So one of the big challenges are that the tools change. The tools change all of the time, tech tools, and it's hard to keep up with them. It's hard to keep up with all the new changes. It's exciting. I mentioned Facebook Live. That is brand new to Facebook, and it was put out in layers. Some people had access right away, and then pages had access, and then communities had access to it. And you do have to use your phone. You can't use it on your computer at this point in time to go live. So there are some challenges to having these wonderful tech tools. Again, they just keep changing. So how do we use Twitter? How do we use our social media platforms? Well, we've been using it for the International Grant Professionals Day. We just had our second International Grant Professionals Day. We used the hashtag IGPW for International Grant Professionals Week. We also used IGPD for International Grant Professionals Day. And we were able to use those hashtags, that's the # with those letters, we were able to use that hashtag across various platforms and track that to see how many people were engaging, how are our partners engaging in International Grant Professionals Day, and are we doing better from year to year? The answer is yes. Yes, we are doing better. So it's great to do that. It's great to use International Grant Professionals Day week and Grant Professionals Day and Week hashtag. We did have a couple of other folks that accidentally used that hashtag, and some of those were pretty funny. Many of them had to do with wrestling. So apparently grant professionals and wrestlers have a lot in common.
Well, and that's such a good point that, everybody's into some of that custom hashtag, or maybe you're not into it, but you love some of the videos that might mock it, or some of those online spoofs. What are some of those that we think would make a lot of sense with our work? We can search hashtags not just in Twitter, but we can look at them everywhere now. And so hashtag grants, that makes sense, or hashtag nonprofit, hashtag nonprofits rock, all legit. So if I'm on Twitter and I'm searching by grants, I'm using maybe Hootsuite, so I'm following that stream, so I can keep an eye on every day. If I'm not going to look at anything else, maybe I'm just going to look at that stream, what happened in the world of grants on Twitter that day. Well, if I then switch and I think about Instagram and I put in hashtag grants, it's not so PG anymore. And this one made me laugh. And when I showed Joe the image to put on here, we both thought, well, yeah, good example. Hashtag grants on Instagram, now we're talking about adult beverages. And it's mixed with our work as grant writing. So IGPW, we're talking about wrestling. Hashtag grants on Instagram, we're talking about adult beverages. Now, what's the link? I guess it could be after a long federal grant. Maybe we need an adult beverage, but really the point is we want to be careful when we're crafting our messages on each network because there are differences, and we would hate to have an example where our grant-seeking organization or us individually as a grant professional accidentally did something unknowingly that really kind of mixed our audiences or put our organization in a negative light. So it does take a lot of forethought and review around you before you start using specific hashtags if you're not already familiar with them.
Great points. So one of the other challenges is keeping up with everything. We've talked about Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. How do we keep up with those things? How can we get all the information to us? There are a lot of tools out there. So there's tools to help us manage our tools. And one that Diane and I both love is Feedly. Feedly will go out. You can follow podcasts. You can follow websites, the RSS feeds, and get the information that you need fed to you each morning. There it is. So you can follow, grants. You can follow your funder. You can follow anything and have that fed to you, so you can weed through all of that noise and have something delivered to your computer. One of the other tools that we love to use is TweetDeck. You can also use Hootsuite. Both of those tools will give you opportunities to follow a specific hashtag, have a column, again, closing out the rest of the noise, following that one column, following that one hashtag that's important to you right then and there. It'll also help you follow groups. You can make Twitter lists. You can make other kinds of lists and follow just that list if you'd like, or just your followers, or just those that you follow. So there's a lot of ways that you can manage the wealth of information that comes to us through social networks. Another tool that we love to use to help put content out, and you can also do this with TweetDeck and with Hootsuite, but Buffer. Buffer is a great tool for you to put content out, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or anything else, any type of information that you have out there. And all of these tools allow you to have teams so that you can work with other people to get the consistency that you need to get the information out. So again, finding the right tools to help you manage getting the information out to the right person, to the right people, to the right constituents, making sure that you're using hashtags, making sure that you're using tools to manage all your tools. Now we'd like to open up the discussion now. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. We'll be happy to unmute you and you can come on in, or if you just want to type it out, feel free to do that as well. You can use the question box in our chat here on the side.
Yep, and Sarah, it looks like your hand's raised again. Sarah Schultz, that is. If you've got another question, by all means, please dial *7 and go ahead and unmute. And one of the things I was chuckling about here is just, so this is the presentation, a little modified, slightly updated, that we gave just this past November in St. Louis. And as I thought about it, Joe, I'm like, my God, we could have switched everything on its head. Things are changing so fast, yet in a way that we could predict a little bit. There's so much that's changing, and it's exciting. I'm like, it makes me so excited. We love to talk about that. And so don't feel overwhelmed. There is no wrong question. We did our best to focus as much in as we could in this short period of time, but really it's all fair game. If you've got a question, by all means, type them into that question box or do an unmute at *7.
All right, so Sarah has a question about hashtags, and she says, how do I follow hashtags via Hootsuite? And Hootsuite is Hootsuite. And the way to do that is it will ask you to search. It has a little search box. You put in the # and whatever the hashtag is, you can search for that, and then also give you an option to create a column based upon that search. You can do that with almost anything, whether it's a hashtag or a person. So just use the search box and then again use that create a column.
And then we've got a question from Carissa. Carissa says that her employer blocks all social media, and so they had to get special permission in order to even access any of it. So that this, she thinks, has been, that she's seen this in other organizations as well. She's asking if we are finding this I'd say mixed bag would be my answer. Joe?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just did a presentation a couple of weeks ago for HUD grantees on social media, and it was for their program manager's school. For me, it's just incredibly exciting that we're at that point where we're talking about social media and HUD's bringing people in to talk about their grantees using it. And most of their grantees are they're located in municipalities. The municipalities have maybe one Twitter handle, and certainly not one little grant program is going to have access to that Twitter handle. And communications wants full control. Now what's happening is that many of the grantees, as we said, are beginning to require social media. And some grant makers, federal grant makers, are requiring that their grantee have access to those social media handles, that maybe they even have a social media handle. Now some people are getting around it by having their partners create the social media handle. So you may have a municipality that works with a nonprofit organization, and that nonprofit organization is able to do the social media promotion for the program. So yes, I am seeing that particularly with government agencies, that there's no access, and institutions of higher education. It seems like some of the nonprofits are a little more nimble and will give access. I think the biggest, and Diane, you can of course add to this, I know, but I think the biggest challenge is this fear, the fear that somebody's going to say something wrong or do something wrong, or that there's going to be, quote unquote, the trolls out there, that somebody's going to hijack that social media platform and it's just too much to handle, and so they just don't do it, which is frustrating because there's so much value to social media, and that's how people are getting their information. Diane, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, and on the fear part, because it happens, mistakes happen, and anything we as humans do, mistakes happen, right? So having a plan in place so that if you're trying to convince an employer to give access, being able to proactively say, this is how we're going to control it. Should something happen, this is how we're watching it, or this is what we're looking for, right? So, and that's an important, maybe a safeguard for them, but to say, yes, we could try this. Right? It's not just the for-profit companies. There's the Applebee's example that went horribly wrong for how they handled a social media American Red Cross had one where someone accidentally, we gave this example last year at our presentation, sure. But somebody at American Red Cross had accidentally, on personal time, posted to their work account. And so the way that it came out, right, they were out there having a good time with friends. Dogfish Head had been mentioned. Well, Dogfish Head got in on the game, and actually it became a nice playful banter, and they ended up supporting then the Red Cross. So, but it takes some good strategy to quickly react to those things in a way that is going to keep your name in the positive light. So there's a legitimate reason to have a little fear, but you can do some really good planning to keep things in check. And along those lines, Linda's asked, I was going to ask about her confidentiality piece. Joe, can you share some info on policies? Because that's really where you've got some great experience. Sure.
And there are issues. So Linda's question is, are there any confidentiality? I'm sorry, guys, I have braces and they just tightened them, so I'm not speaking as clearly as usual. There are some issues with confidentiality, particularly with when you're sharing graphics and things, any photos. If you're out there working with kids, I'm sure that the examples that Diane gave us earlier with the kids and the grantee program, you would need to have confidentiality agreements signed. So if that school had permission from the parents for those kids to be in photos of activities, that would be great. So yes, you do want to make sure that you have that you have policies in place, that you have forms in place, that you're aware of any confidentiality issues when you're out, especially when you're posting pictures. There are social media policies and guidelines out there. We have some great examples. We can share some of those with you. Just email me. You can email me, joe@smartygrants.com. That will be at the end of this. You should have that on your last page. Have a way to contact me, and we can get that information to you. So making sure that you think ahead, as with anything, that you think ahead that you have policies, you have guidelines, and that people are trained on how to respond and how to protect confidentiality. So we have a question from Simon here. Simon says, in the beginning we mentioned that some funders will make a grant on the basis of a grantee's tweet application. That was one particular program with the Deluxe Corporation. They asked for folks to nominate nonprofits, and that was regional. So they had some regional eligibility requirements. They had some other, what the organization's mission was. You would nominate them through the tweet, and then the organization, Deluxe Corporation, would actually go out and look at that organization and see if they would be an appropriate match for based upon their eligibility criteria and Deluxe's mission for that grant. So it's not a common thing. It was just an interesting way that social media was being used within that intersection of grants and social media. I like what Carissa says here. She says, I think that they, being the people who are keeping us from using social media, the communications departments, et cetera, that they see social media as a distraction for most employees rather than a tool. And like Carissa says, she's working on it. We all are.
That's great. And I was going to say, well, we've got an easy question. So Sandy's asked, is the presentation being recorded and are the slides available? And the answer is yes and yes. And so you should receive that back from them. Kelly with the GPA staff will be handling that afterwards. And Greg Bell, we see, has a question. If you'd like to dial *7 to unmute, you can ask your question live.
Yeah, I think actually Simon's question was similar to ours, so I think you guys had sort of answered that for us.
Oh, perfect. Well, thanks for chiming in. Good to talk with you.
Yes.
So here are my contact pieces for social media handles. I love to connect with folks, share info, and I always joke, I'm like, you might not love all these different networks, but LinkedIn definitely is a great place.
Well, I just don't see,
Greg,
I'm just grabbing
Greg, if you can dial...
I don't see this as an effective prospecting research arena.
Greg? Are you asking a question?
Well, actually,
No, if Greg, can you dial *6 to mute your line, please?
There we go, and here's Joe.
Yes, so you can find me on Twitter at @jm_grants. We also have some other handles for Smarty Grants and Grant Chat. I love to connect with everyone everywhere. So Smarty Grants, Twitter, Grant Chat, remember the _ grant_chat. And then, of course, you can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page for Smarty Grants, and please join our Facebook group for Grant Chat. It's pretty new, but I think it's going to be exciting with that Facebook Live option.
Wonderful. And I realized we should have had a slide with all of the GPA handles on there as well. You're going to find GPA everywhere, right? It wasn't just a LinkedIn example that we gave. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, GPA's on Instagram. GPA's everywhere because it's amazing. So connect there too. Sorry for not thinking about that one, Kelly.
Yeah. Well, and GPA's handle is @GPA National. You can also follow Mike Chamberlain, the CEO, at GPA_CEO, or is it CEO_GPA? Good question.
I don't have that in front of me. I think it's GPA_CEO.
Yep. And the Grant Professionals Certification Institute and the Grant Professionals Foundation are also, they have their own Facebook pages and have Twitter handles as well.
Well, I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know, Joe, thank you for being my co-presenter. I always love the chance to hop online with you and talk about social media and grants. And I know I'm speaking for you, but we've got our contact info everywhere because we're totally happy to have conversations and answer emails later. So here's our emails one last time in case you missed it anywhere else.
Thank you, Diane.
Also, you can email.
Always a pleasure.
You can also email Kelly or any GPA staff, and I can provide the contact information to everybody. Okay, well, that concludes our webinar. We'd like to ask each of you to remain with us a few moments longer and complete the short survey that you see on your screen. Please take a minute to evaluate the webinar and provide us with topics for our future webinars. And also, I know one of the questions was, is the presentation recorded and are slides available? The presentation is being recorded. You will all get the recorded version after this. The slides are available on your invite that you received to access this webinar. You'll see them on the right-hand column under either deliverables or materials. So you should be able to pull them up from there. Joe and Diane, thank you so much for all of your time that you've put into this wonderful webinar and all of your expertise. It's greatly appreciated. Also, thank you to all of you who have attended. We're so glad that you can join us and hope that this session was helpful for you. Also, remember that this webinar qualifies for 1 credit towards GPC CEUs, so you can use those as well. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week and have a good holiday weekend. Have a good day.